What if I told you that Valentine's Day wasn't always about love? That beneath the chocolates, roses, and romantic dinners lies a history soaked in blood, betrayal, and even pagan rituals? For centuries, we've been told that February 14th is the day of love, a time to celebrate romance, exchange gifts, and cherish our partners. But what if I told you that Valentine's Day was once a brutal festival of sacrifices, public beatings, and forbidden love? The story of Valentine's Day is far darker than what we've been made to believe. It begins not with candlelit dinners, but with naked men whipping women for fertility in an ancient Roman festival. It involves a secret rebellion against a ruthless emperor, and a man sentenced to death for performing illegal marriages. And it ends with the modern world turning it into a multi-billion-dollar business that thrives on the pressure to prove love through money. In this video, we'll uncover the shocking pagan festival that might be the real origin of Valentine's Day, the tragic tale of Saint Valentine, who he really was and why he was executed, how medieval poets, greeting card companies, and big corporations turned a day of sacrifice into the most profitable romantic holiday of the year. By the time we're done, you might never look at Valentine's Day the same way again. Are you ready to uncover the truth? Let's begin. Before there were roses, before love letters, before Saint Valentine himself, there was Lupercalia, an ancient Roman festival that was anything but romantic. Imagine this, it's mid-February in Rome, around 300 BC. The streets are filled with half-naked men, covered in the blood of freshly sacrificed goats and dogs. They're running through the city, whipping young women with strips of animal hide, not out of cruelty, but because people actually believed it would make them more fertile. Sounds insane, right? But to the Romans, Lupercalia was a sacred festival of fertility, purification, and primal instincts. It was held every year from February 13th to 15th, in honor of Lupercus, the Roman god of fertility, and Romulus and Remus, the legendary twin founders of Rome who were raised by a she-wolf. The ritual began in a cave, where a group of priests known as the Luperci would sacrifice a goat and a dog. The goat symbolized fertility, while the dog was seen as a purifier. Then, these priests would smear the blood on their foreheads before laughing it off and cleaning it with wool soaked in milk. But the real madness started after the sacrifice. The men, often young and from noble families, would cut the goat's skin into long strips, called februa, which, by the way, is where we get the word February. Then, they'd run through the streets whipping any woman who crossed their path. And here's the shocking part. Women actually lined up for it. Why? Because it was believed that a lash from the februa would increase their fertility and even help them conceive healthy children. But fertility rituals weren't the only thing Lupercalia was known for. It also had a bizarre matchmaking system. Young men and women would draw names from a jar, and whoever they picked became their partner. Sometimes just for the festival, sometimes for an entire year. Sound familiar? Some historians believe this random pairing tradition was one of the earliest forms of Valentine's Day matchmaking. But that wasn't enough for the early Christian church. They needed to erase Lupercalia and replace it with something more holy. So, what did they do? They found a martyr, a man who defied a Roman emperor for the sake of love, a man whose execution would forever be linked to February 14th. His name was Valentine. So, the pagan festival of Lupercalia was in full swing: blood sacrifices, public beatings, and strange matchmaking rituals. But the early Christian church wanted to erase these uncivilized traditions. And that's where Saint Valentine comes in. But here's the twist. There wasn't just one Saint Valentine. There were at least three. The most famous of them was a Roman priest living in the 3rd century AD under Emperor Claudius II, also known as Claudius the Cruel. And if his nickname didn't give it away, let's just say Claudius was not a fan of romance. He believed that married soldiers were weak soldiers, that men fought better when they had nothing to lose. So, he issued a brutal decree. No young man in Rome could get married. Marriage was banned. But one man defied him, a priest named Valentine. Valentine saw how young lovers were being torn apart by the empire. Secretly, he continued performing marriages in defiance of the emperor's orders. He became a symbol of love and rebellion, whispering vows in candlelit rooms while Roman soldiers hunted him down. But he was eventually caught. Claudius had him arrested, tortured, and sentenced to death. And this is where the story takes an even more tragic turn. While in prison, Valentine supposedly fell in love with the jailer's daughter. Some say she was blind, and that Valentine miraculously restored her sight. Others say she was simply someone who showed him kindness in his final days. Either way, on the night before his execution, he wrote her a letter. A letter signed, "From Your Valentine." The next day, February 14th, 269 AD, he was beheaded. And so, the church had found their replacement for Lupercalia, a martyr who died for love, a holy figure to erase the pagan festival. By the year 496 AD, Pope Gelasius officially declared February 14th as Saint Valentine's Day, a day to honor his sacrifice. But here's the question. If Valentine's Day was now about a saint, how did it become about romantic love? For that, we need to fast forward a few hundred years, to a time of knights, poets, and secret love letters. So, by 496 AD, February 14th was officially Saint Valentine's Day. But for centuries, it was just that, a religious feast day, not a day of love. So, how did we go from a priest's execution to romantic dinners and love letter? We owe a lot of it to a poet, one of the most influential writers of all time, Geoffrey Chaucer. If you've ever read the Canterbury Tales, you know Chaucer loved to mix history with fiction. And in 1382, he wrote a poem called Parliament of Fowls that linked Valentine's Day with romantic love for the first time. And get this, it wasn't even about humans. It was about birds. In the poem, Chaucer describes February 14th as the day when birds choose their mates for the year. Now, was this actually true? No. Medieval Europe was cold in February. Birds weren't out matchmaking. But Chaucer was so influential that people started associating Valentine's Day with love and courtship. And once the poets got involved, the nobles followed. By the 1400s, Valentine's Day love letters became a trend among royals and aristocrats. One of the oldest surviving Valentine's Day messages comes from Charles, Duke of Orleans. While imprisoned in the Tower of London in 1415, he wrote a poem to his wife, calling her his very gentle Valentine. But here's the crazy part. For centuries, Valentine's Day was only celebrated by the wealthy. Love letters, poems, and courtly gestures were luxuries reserved for nobles and poets. So how did it become a holiday for everyone? Enter the printing press, Shakespeare, and the Industrial Revolution. By the 1600s, William Shakespeare was writing about Valentine's Day in plays like Hamlet. Books and poems spread the idea that February 14th was the day to express love. Then, in the 1800s, something big happened. The Industrial Revolution made printing cheap. For the first time, ordinary people could afford printed Valentine's cards. And that's when businesses saw an opportunity. By the mid-1800s, factories were mass-producing Valentine's cards. In 1840s America, Esther Howland, known as the mother of the American Valentine, turned Valentine's cards into a booming business. And that was just the beginning. By the 1900s, chocolate companies, flower shops, and jewelers all jumped in. Love wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a product. Valentine's Day had officially been commercialized. But just how big did it get? Let's talk money. So, by the 1900s, Valentine's Day was no longer just about poetry and love letters. It had become a business. And today, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Every year, people around the world spend over $25 billion on Valentine's Day. Let's break that down. 250 million roses are grown just for February 14th. Over 145 million Valentine's cards are exchanged in the US alone. People spend $5 billion on jewelry, $2 billion on flowers, and $4 billion on fancy dinners. And here's the craziest part. About $1 billion is spent on Valentine's gifts for pets. Yes, people are buying chocolates for their dogs. So how did this happen? Well, you can thank a few key players for turning Valentine's Day into a shopping spree. In the 1860s, Cadbury started selling heart-shaped chocolate boxes, and people couldn't resist. By 1913, Hallmark began mass-producing Valentine's Day cards, making it easier than ever to buy, rather than write, a message of love. And by the 1950s, TV commercials and marketing campaigns sealed the deal. Love was now something you could buy. And here's the truth. Valentine's Day isn't really about love anymore. It's about consumerism. Every year, companies manipulate emotions through marketing. Fear-based ads. If you really love them, you'll buy this expensive gift. Limited time offers, only available for Valentine's Day. Don't miss out. Social pressure. Everyone else is doing it. Why aren't you? It's the same strategy used on Black Friday, Christmas, and every other major holiday. But here's the real question. If Valentine's Day started as a brutal Roman festival, then became a saint's feast day, then a poet's invention, and now a marketing machine, does it still have any real meaning? Or has the true essence of love been completely sold out? So, here we are. We started with a violent Roman ritual, met a martyred saint, followed the rise of medieval romance, and exposed the billion-dollar industry behind it all. Now, the big question. Does Valentine's Day still mean anything? Well, it depends on how you see it. For businesses, it's a goldmine. For poets, it's a tradition. For some, it's a day of love. And for others, it's just another Friday. But here's the truth. Love has never been about a date on the calendar. It's not about buying the perfect gift or posting the right picture. Love is about what happens on the other 364 days of the year. When no one is watching, when there's no pressure to spend money, and when love isn't a trend, it's a choice. So whether you celebrate Valentine's Day or not, just remember, love isn't defined by history, marketing, or tradition. It's defined by you. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real meaning of Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day, or just Happy Friday. Either way, make it count.